It's a sad commentary on the inversion of our morality when the classic pearl-clutching Helen Lovejoy mantra of "won't somebody please think of the children" is completely flipped all the way to "won't somebody please think of the child molesters." Strictly speaking, that would be a slightly exaggerated way to characterize this case. More accurately, it's "won't somebody please think of the transgender people," even if they happen to be child molesters, and even if they're not even sincerely transgender, just opportunistically transgender, because we do, in fact, think of the transgender people so generously that becoming one affords special privileges, because the transgenderism is apparently the highest moral priority in this case. The pursuit of justice itself is crafted on transgenderism's terms. Another moral inversion on its own. But before I bury the lead any further with just how insane the backstory that got us here is, an emphasis on the headline. February 24th, Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon suspends prosecutor for misgendering and dead-naming trans child molester accused of murder. Pronouns are a due process right, even if you clearly aren't serious about your own pronouns. This woman couldn't even be bothered to shave his beard.
And an arrest of this suspect, then ID'd as James Tubbs. Now, a 26-year-old transgender woman, Hannah Tubbs.
If the guy doesn't look like he's treating his new identity seriously, that's because he isn't. He's treating it opportunistically. But before we get to the absurdity of prosecutorial discipline for calling this man a man, we have to understand the prior absurdity of just how sickeningly lightly this convicted child molester has already been treated. Prior to his last few years in custody, James Tubbs lived a vagrant lifestyle, moving between Idaho, Washington, and California. He had law enforcement encounters for crimes ranging from panhandling and drug possession to battery for attacking a man with a knife, but the depths of his degeneracy were far worse. In 2014, he staked out a stall in the women's bathroom of a Denny's restaurant in Palmdale, California, north of LA, waiting for a prospective victim to enter. Soon enough, a 10-year-old girl did. Tubbs pulled her into the stall and sexually molested her. Tubbs was not identified as the attacker at the time. In fact, he got away with it for over 5 years until 2019, when DNA evidence revived the cold case. By then, Tubbs was 23 years old, which is where the insane treatment of this case begins. When Tubbs committed the Denny's bathroom attack, he was 17, just 2 weeks shy of his 18th birthday. So even though he wasn't arrested and charged until age 23, at the time of the crime, and according to the strict prosecutorial policy of incoming District Attorney George Gascon, James Tubbs was a minor. And anybody under 18 at the time of committing a crime would not be prosecuted or sentenced as an adult, James Tubbs included. Any prosecution would be handled in the juvenile system. Any sentencing would be handled in the juvenile system, meaning, yes, James Tubbs, the 23-year-old man, would be sent to a juvenile detention facility for any sentence. James Tubbs pleaded guilty in this child molestation case, and while you may think it's outrageous to send an admitted, convicted child molester to be with children for punishment, it is, but the outrageousness had only just begun. Upon his arrest and charging, James Tubbs, as previously referenced, suddenly decided to become Hannah Tubbs. And if by sentencing time, now 26-year-old man James Tubbs committed this attack on a child as a technical minor himself, and if James Tubbs is now a woman, well, that means James Tubbs must be sentenced to detention with the very same little girls he attacked, because after all, James Tubbs was just a little girl himself when he committed this crime. And so the sentence in January 2022 was 2 years to be served in the company of little girls for the guy convicted of sexually assaulting a little girl. It's like punishing the Cookie Monster with 2 years hard labor at Pillsbury. This isn't punitive. This isn't justice. If anything, it might be worse than just letting him go outright. And just like his beard, James Tubbs didn't even hide his motivation behind this opportunistic gender transition. Shortly after sentencing, a local Fox reporter obtained jailhouse phone call audio of Tubbs speaking with his father in November 2021, strategizing for that upcoming sentencing. Tubbs boasted how, because he's being treated as a juvenile female in the justice system, his punishment will be minimal, and he won't even have to register as a sex offender.
Don't worry about it. It's a strike, but they're going to plead. I'm going to plead out to it. I'm going to plead guilty. They're going to stick me on probation, and it's going to be dropped. It's going to be done. I won't have to register. I won't have to nothing.
For an offender, you don't have to register?
I won't have to do none of that.
So what are they going to do to you then?
Nothing.
So, to avoid the most serious consequences, Tubbs instructed his father to refer to him with female pronouns in court.
Now they're going to put me with other trannies that have similar cases like mine. So when you come to court, make sure you address me as her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be hard, but you have to do it. What we're trying to avoid is the registering thing. That's what we're working hardest to not do. We're also trying to avoid going to prison again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And as part of this rehearsal, Dad needed further coaching to remember his now daughter's new name. When James' attorneys told his dad they were representing Hannah, Dad says he was confused. Laughing, not knowing who they were talking about, Dad said to his son on the call he would have picked Jamie, perhaps because it would be easier to remember for the sake of the ruse. In a final irony that dismisses any plausible belief of transgender authenticity, Tubbs apparently grew weary of being treated like a kid as he schemed. In the juvenile detention facility to which he was sentenced, staff members say he got frustrated and screamed at them, quote, "I'm a grown-ass man." Perhaps the most truthful thing Tubbs has ever said. The fact that District Attorney Gascon ever entertained any delusions otherwise points to either insane ideological commitment at the expense of child protection or just plain stupidity. But the latter is what the DA went with. Tubbs pleaded guilty to offenses as a little girl, and Gascon pleaded guilty to being an idiot. The DA said he didn't know about Tubbs' jailhouse calls at the time of sentencing, and the opportunistic conversion to womanhood for the sake of lenience, and speaking dismissively about his victim, as Tubbs also did. Had DA Gascon known, he says he would have pursued something harsher. But he did know. According to prosecutors in his own office, one of his deputies points to email chains discussing the calls at the highest levels of the DA's office prior to sentencing. Gascon insists he also didn't know about Tubbs' criminal priors or a prior accusation of molesting another girl in California in 2013. As we're about to get to, Gascon also denied knowledge of a separate criminal investigation in neighboring Kern County, that's Bakersfield. "I'm not evil. I'm just very, very bad at my job," Gascon said. And even if you personally don't find that explanation satisfactory, Los Angeles County voters apparently do. Or at least they did by the proxy of not gathering enough signatures for Gascon's recall last year. For the second time in 2 years, a Gascon recall effort failed last summer because there were insufficient signatories in support of putting it on the ballot. The good news is James Tubbs' opportunity to abuse kids any further at the juvenile facility only lasted a few months, from late January until early May last year. The bad news is Tubbs was transferred out because he became an accused murderer. See, that other prosecution the DA denied any knowledge of turns out to be a murder case from 2019 in Bakersfield. Tubbs is accused of robbing and beating a vacationing camper to death with a rock at Lake Isabella, just northeast of the city. Witnesses say Tubbs admitted to it. In May last year, prosecutors filed charges, and so Tubbs was transferred out of little girl daycare and into grown-ass men's confinement in Kern County. So yes, just so we're keeping up here, it's not just that they put a grown man admitted child molester in a little girl's facility. They very likely put a grown man child molester murderer in a little girl's facility. Don't let those horrors distract you, though, because of course, we still haven't discussed the true horror, the headline that we started with, the unacceptable misgendering and dead naming of this admitted child molester and accused murderer. This case involves prosecutors from both jurisdictions now. If Tubbs is convicted of murder, he's going to prison. Adult this time, because he was an adult when he committed that crime. But if he's acquitted, well, then it's right back to little girl daycare for him. So LA County prosecutors remain involved in this case. Specifically, the prosecutor who led that initial child molestation case in LA County. His name is Shay Santa, and although he prosecuted the case that put Tubbs in little girl daycare, he's not happy with that strategy or that outcome. Ultimately, he does work for DA Gascon, and so those decisions were Gascon's to make, but Santa has been publicly critical of this case's handling, saying Tubbs should have been tried as an adult, and the entire claim of transgenderism was just an opportunistic sham. But it's not just the public criticism that has him facing discipline at the office. Santa has now been suspended from work for a week, part of what he believes is a growing paper trail in the direction of firing him for the high crime of misgendering and dead-naming James Tubbs. Santa says he is accused of referring to Tubbs with male pronouns on a work Zoom call and calling him James Tubbs in a Twitter post, that of course being the offense of dead-naming, using an old name the transgender person no longer goes by. Now, of course, that's just Santa saying that, but when asked, the LA County DA's office all but confirmed that explanation is accurate. A DA spokeswoman says, strictly speaking, the office doesn't publicly discuss the specifics of a personnel matter, but they will confirm these are the actions of enforcement as conducted by an equity investigation. Well, say no more then. What matters here is not that we bring justice to a child molesting murderer. What matters here is that we refer to that child molesting murderer exactly as he commands us to. That's not my inference. That is the policy statement from the DA's office. The spokeswoman adds, I can also say that the transgender community is frequently the target of violent attacks. They are reluctant to come forward to report those attacks because of how they're treated in the legal system. That's why swift justice for misgendering and dead-naming is so important. In other words, the theoretical violence that could be enabled by not using the right words is more important than justice for the actual violence that this guy committed habitually in at least one admitted case against a child. And ironically, that child, or the young woman that she is now, doesn't care at all about James Tubbs' supposed gender identity, just like James Tubbs himself. Last year, the victim said it was unfair to try James Tubbs as a woman because he clearly didn't act like one when he attacked her in a bathroom stall. Well, how dare she discourage victims from speaking by accurately describing her own victimization? That's the concern that we're supposed to have. We're supposed to believe that we are preventing future violence by treating the perpetrators of violence not just lightly, but arguably with reward. No sex offender registration and 2 years of more convenient access to little girls. He doesn't even have to do the hard work of staking out and hiding in the stall anymore. Instead, the state just buses the kids right to him. So we'll see if they get him on this murder charge, but who knows? He committed that crime as a grown-ass man, but of course now he's just a delicate flower. So does that put James or Hannah on trial? That matters not just in the pronouns that'll be used in court documents. It matters in determining where he goes if convicted. It will be adult prison, Santa says, but for adult men or adult women? We don't yet know. Hopefully, there's opportunity for retribution, a reversal, someplace where instead he is kidnapped into a stall with someone much larger than him to have his way, someplace where it no longer matters whether others call him James or Hannah, a place where the only name that matters is what he calls his cellmate at night. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below and especially over on Gab. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.